Welcome, everyone. I am very pleased to be with you here today, moderating our discussion on a topic that I think is really top of mind for many leaders: how managers can cultivate an experience of connection in our new world of work. My name is Steve Garcia. I'm co-founder and managing partner at Contemporary Leadership Advisors, or as we affectionately refer to it, CLA. And if we could go to the next slide and meet our panelists. Okay, so we've got a wonderfully experienced and innovative group today who all, I know, having spoken with them, have unique and powerful insights to share. Please welcome Cheryl DeSantis, Chief People and Diversity Officer at Smile Direct Club, Teresa Logie, Head of Manager Excellence at Zurich North America, and Jody Rabinowitz, Global Head of Talent and Organizational Development at Zoom, as well as Natalie Baumgartner, my partner at CLA, and the Chief Workforce Scientist at Achievers. So panelists, I want to say thank you for taking the time to share your perspective with us today. I'm really excited about the conversation. Okay, so we're going to start with Natalie, who's done a lot of research in this area, providing some background on how we think about connection and why it's important in today's business environment.
Great. Thanks so much, Steve. I am really so excited for our discussion today. I have spent my career deeply devoted to understanding and supporting and advising on organizational culture. And that's because, as a psychologist and a researcher by training, all of my analysis and practice and experience just continually drives to this conclusion that a well-aligned culture, a well-understood, deeply inspired, effectively managed culture truly is the foundation of success for every organization. Our organizational culture, how we do things, it's statistically speaking, one of the most powerful predictors of whether employees and organizations thrive. And that's always been true. Whether effectively managed or not, culture is the glue that binds us together, attracting and engaging and retaining the talent that allows us to achieve our strategic goals. During the pandemic, in fact, managers found that their employees really rated the culture of their organization and the connection with their manager as one of the really the most significant factors that was keeping them connected and engaged with their organization. Now, however, though culture is our foundation, has always been true, the world revolving around our organizations, it's forever changed. Employees around the globe, they've voted with their voices, with their hearts, with their feet. They want flexibility and where and how they work. And yet we simultaneously want and need a deep sense of connection, of the glue that culture provides. And who are the people tasked with delivering that experience, that dual experience of all of our employees? Our managers. They are the front line of culture carriers, and they hold a responsibility for ensuring that every member of our organizations has an experience of connection and belonging at work. Yet no roadmap has existed to guide them as they navigate this new terrain. And I imagine that many of you, like those of us who are speaking today, have had the experience of our managers really grappling with how they deliver what their employees need. So through our research and our experience in working with C-suite leaders and employees over decades, we've leveraged academic analysis, business research, and practical experience in developing a model to guide all of our people leaders with clear steps to deliver an authentic experience of connection for every person at work. The model is what you see here on the screen, and I'll just share it with you briefly so you hold it in mind as we have this conversation around how to create an experience of connection for the people who are our organization. The first factor is invited. We must encourage employees to bring their whole selves to work through culture onboarding and genuine invitations to contribute, whether they're new to our company or new to a team or simply new to a conversation. Understood. We need to leverage simple yet impactful ways to ensure that employees feel seen and known as unique and valuable individuals. We are all our own people, and we want those who are around us to understand who we are. Empowered. We must scaffold the development of employees' passions and purpose with development tools and a coaching mindset to help them grow throughout their career, whether this is their first job or they're a senior CEO at the very end of their career. Empowered. We must scaffold the development of employee passions and purpose with development tools and a coaching mindset. Linked. We have to support the development of meaningful networked connections with leaders and colleagues. We have to be interrelated with one another. We know in organizations that what's happened during the pandemic is that many of us have lost that thread to one another and we're adrift, and that needs to shift. We must be connected to the people around us. And finally, appreciated. We need to prioritize recognizing and appreciating employees for their care and their impact on both a personal and a professional level. Now, this model isn't rocket science. It's not intended to be. No leader today needs an overly heady or lofty encyclopedia filling their inbox. This is about keeping the essential components of connection at the fingertips of those who are charged with fostering an experience of connection for the people who are your organization, regardless of where they sit. Now, this panel that you're about to hear from is comprised of some of the most forward-thinking, trailblazing leaders in our business arena. They are thinking about culture and connection every single day and navigating the constantly changing circumstances around them to help their leaders, their people leaders, their managers, to create that experience of connection and belonging for every one of their employees, because it is the ingredient that will ensure that we can attract, retain, and engage people as we move forward in this business arena. So I'm really thrilled to turn over our conversation back to Steve to guide us through, I think, what will be a really, I hope, provocative, enlightening, and practical conversation about how we create an experience of connection, how we empower our managers to foster that for our people. So turning it back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Natalie. That was a great overview. And so let's start. Let's have each of our panelists just share a little bit about their role, what's currently going on inside their organization, what's top of mind, and how it affects employees' abilities to connect with their manager, one another, and the broader enterprise. Let's start, Jody. Let's start with you. Can you share what's going on at Zoom at the moment and how it relates to connection?
Well, interesting that you asked that, Steve. Talk about connection. We basically disconnected 1,300 employees on Tuesday. And I would like to say I'm one of the original Zoomies. I am employee number 1513. Prior to Tuesday, we were 8,000. So I have been through a lot. I've been through the first, the IPO, the pandemic, and now this is a different kind of pandemic. And that's what's going on this week. In the same vein, we're going to be introducing next week our new strategy and launching our cultural tenants initiative, refreshing our cultural tenants since they haven't been touched in 10 years. So it's been an interesting ride.
Jody, I know I can always count on you for keeping it real, so thank you. And it sounds like there's a lot going on. So I'll be really curious to get your perspective as we go. Teresa or Cheryl, would one of you like to jump in?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thank you, Steve. Very, very happy to be here today. So I'm with Zurich North America. We're a global organization doing business in about 210 countries. Globally, we have 56,000 employees, and in North America, we have about 9, all supported by about 1,450 managers. And very much to Natalie's point on the importance of managers, at Zurich North America, we have designated a role that I have the privilege of leading, which is focused solely on building managerial excellence in North America. Because we really understand the importance of managers in building the culture and building the connections that are critical. And so the good news is my position was identified right before COVID. And so a little bit serendipitously, we had started to really think deeply about this, do a lot of external research, and figure out what is it that our managers need to be doing more so. Of course, when the pandemic hit, we did a very quick pivot and needed to focus very much on the important skills around leading with empathy, compassion, and really fostering an inclusive environment. So our focus initially became very narrow. And where we are today, we actually just today announced very strong business results. In fact, historic highs in terms of our operating profit. So really proud of the successes that we're delivering as a business. And of course, that's only possible when you have engaged employees. So really happy to be here
That's
today.
terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And Cheryl, how about for you at Smile Direct Club?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl. I'm the Chief People and Diversity Officer. So Smile Direct Club is a disruptive kind of pioneer in the direct-to-consumer teeth straightening business. We're 8 years old, and over the course of that 8 years, we've gone from straight D2C to now being a fully integrated oral care company. So not only do we straighten your teeth, but we whiten it, and then you can buy things in retail stores like toothpaste, toothbrushes, different products, and things like that. We went public in 2019, right before a lot of the market changed, and then, of course, had to really pivot and learn post-COVID. So as a company, we were very much in person, and that energy would come from in person, and driving the culture and driving engagement would come from being in person. Post-COVID, we went to our headquarters being fully virtual, 100% virtual. But then we still have a very large manufacturing operation here and another facility in Costa Rica. And then we have retail outlets where you can go get your teeth scanned. And so those are in person. And so as we were navigating that, we really had to think about a different way to drive culture and engagement and retention and to continue to thread together the business, even though we had this kind of mix of virtual and in person and really trying to learn and navigate and pivot our business model, right? Because as you can imagine, in COVID, you weren't going to go get your teeth scanned. And so I'm very proud of where we are. I will say, like Jody and almost every tech company that's around, in January, we also went through a layoff. And we're coming out of that and really looking to rebuild that connectivity with our team members and that trust. And so this is very topical today because it's top of mind in what we're doing with our managers.
Something I was thinking about between Natalie's introduction around how pivotal the manager role is in creating the connection. And then Teresa, I'm jealous and delighted by your results. Our results are coming out. I don't know what they are, but anyway, and your manager excellence program is that I just want to give you perspective, knowing that how critical a manager's role is. We were hiring 200 people a month right in the middle of COVID. Literally 3/4 of our workforce was hired in the middle of COVID. So that means that we had new managers, right, starting. And we just had 259 managers that had to deliver messages to 1,300 employees, many of whom have never experienced either being on the receiving end of a message or giving a message. So I'm sort of like, again, just sort of preaching your story, Natalie, around doubling down on, and Teresa, the skill building, and Cheryl, all the work you're doing around, rebuilding trust, just how center a manager is and what that experience creates for people.
So Jody, how do you do that? How did you do that at Zoom, right? I think you brought up the great point that, managers aren't just responsible for connecting, but in some cases, unfortunately, also for disconnecting with employees. And so how do you empower them to see themselves as the vehicle for that, to both, ensure that they're doing that, going through those difficult, disconnection process in the most empathetic, sort of authentic way possible. Well, also, I know you mentioned at the start that you guys are building, or sort of, doing a culture relaunch, while also connecting and sort of helping to drive that throughout the enterprise.
Well, I'll answer it in three parts. Part one, in the midst of COVID, when we had all these new managers, we literally brought in tech teams together and have them like spill their guts in a constructive way. How are you feeling? What has this been like to you? What are you learning about your leader? What are you learning about each other? What do you want to carry forward? And so that was a very human experience. Like there was a lot of sharing and a lot of vulnerability. And so that experience in and of itself was connection. Part two, I have never been part of a 1,300 person downsizing in a remote environment where you don't have the 3 times I got fired, somebody sat with me, the HR person, the manager, got the message delivered, manager left the room, HR person went over the package. You have any questions, pack up your stuff and go. That, like, sort of in the age of social media and how fast news travels, it was, send the email, then follow up immediately with a face-to-face, and then it goes out to the press, and then LinkedIn lights up. And so there were not lots and lots of levels knew about the reduction in force. And so not everybody had as much time to prepare as we would have liked. So, and again, as I mentioned, not everybody was experienced at doing it. So we did our best to arm them with tools and give them an opportunity to read the script. And, but I am sure that because people deeply care, Zoom is a highly affiliative company. Managers probably followed up and did things like cry and said, this was really hard. And with the speed of this virtual thing, I think we did our best to prepare people. And what I'm hoping, and then I'll stop talking, what I'm hoping comes out of this is that every single manager will remember what it's like to deliver a message, follow up, do their best to hold on to that employee, the impacted employee, whether it was hard to listen to or angry, whatever it was, and that every employee who was impacted and had a good or bad experience on the receiving end of that takes it with them to the next place, because that is what builds culture and connection. If it's a bad experience, you make it a corrective one if you have to do it again. If it's a good experience, you repeat it. That deep feeling stuff that you can't dodge, that's what makes connection and culture. Experience.
It's a great point. Thank you. I'm curious about, more and more we create value in organizations by working sort of horizontally across silos rather than working sort of within vertically in the chain of command. And, managers take on a really critical role in terms of facilitating that cross-enterprise connection. So Cheryl, I'd like to ask you, because I know we talked about this a little bit before. It sounds like you're doing some really cool work around with cohorts to sort of promote that cross-enterprise connection. Could you just sort of share a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, obviously when everybody went virtual and when we went virtual for good last year, you kind of start setting up your new norms, your new ways of working. And having watched it for a little bit, my experience was we're very good at vertically meeting with our teams, right? We meet with our direct reports, we have one-on-ones, we meet with our full team, we have town halls. Everybody in my line, the HR team, there's connectivity there, right? And actually I was part of another Achievers webinar with Natalie where she went through the model, and I just kept looking at the word linked. And it was such an aha for me because I spent most of my career at Mars, and at Mars, relationship building was like the number one skill you needed to have there to navigate that complex organization. And somehow in my, at Smile Direct Club, I think because it came organically when we were in person, it kind of fell off the radar when we went virtual. And so I had this aha that we're doing a really good job building relationships and being linked vertically, but there's no accountability horizontally. Like my team doesn't know that new great director that started, that's bringing all of this experience in IT, or that rock star senior manager in marketing who's bringing some great new ideas. There's just not the forums for that to happen, and we're not crossing each other. So at STC, we have a cohort strategy this year. We're starting with a VP level cohort. And what we're doing is we're investing some development with an executive coach so that they can get their own development. But then part of the interaction is how they lead together as a cohort and how they can reach out to other teams and provide that visible leadership so that people feel really the thread that holds our culture together is going horizontal instead of just vertical, because that's where it's going to be more impactful. And we're looking to roll something out at the director level mid-year. And again, just start to stitch this organization back together where you feel like a band of brothers and sisters. You feel like, wow, I'm really learning and growing from those to the left and right of me, not just in there. Because that's how culture carries on, is when you see and hear the language used by others, and it just reinforces it, makes it that much stronger.
That's great. And I'm sure one of the things that happens when you bring those folks together is they start to see that they're not the only ones with they start to see the similarity in the issues that they all share, which probably just makes it easier for them to connect and relate to one another because they have a sense of commonality.
Yeah, and if you think about us coming out of a reduction in force, there's a lot of focus on, like I said earlier, rebuilding trust, re-engaging leaders, empowering people to share and give hope on the path forward. I believe in this model when you go through change called honor the past, be honest about the present where you are, and give hope for the future. Well, to give that united hope for the future, you have to pull these teams together at a lower level so that they can do it, because your managers are the 20% that's managing the 80%, right? So if you can wrap your arms around those levels and make sure they feel really connected to where the business is going. And by the way, making it mutual. So when we're looking at our cohorts, it's not just, hey, we want you guys to lead together to drive retention, commitment, and engagement. It's we're going to invest in your development so that you guys can learn a common language and lead together. So it is a very mutual approach. But for me, that linked circle is so important in where we are as businesses. I mean, they're all important, but that's the one that in this remote and virtual world and working from home is one that I think needs a lot of attention.
Cheryl, you're doing peer cohort? I'm sorry. So the coaching is in a peer cohort forum, or individual, or just they're doing it as a
they're cohort. Doing it as a peer cohort.
And is there a subject? In other words, it's like, today we're going to talk about collaboration. Today we're going to talk about, or is it more
there's two subjects. One is an individual. I'm going to come in and say, here are some of the things I want to work on and I want to get some coaching on. And then the other is how they set the goals and kind of ways of working so that we can lead through this change in our business. So there's kind of an individual one and a collective one.
And Teresa, I know you're doing something similar at Zurich North America, right? With like peer-to-peer learning.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in here. So one of the things that we're focused on, back to how are we empowering our managers, it's really through feedback. And so we have implemented an upward feedback approach where all of our managers, including the C-suite, our CEO is actually very deeply engaged in this work as well. All employees provide feedback to their managers. They get an individual report, which shows how they're doing against what we have defined as our manager framework, which essentially defines what great managers do at Zurich North America. So then to support them through what we call the Empowering Managers Through Feedback journey, we've developed these peer-to-peer discussion circles. And so to date, we have had over 850 of our managers participate in the peer-to-peer discussion circles. And so to your point, Jody, earlier around, is there a topic that we're bringing to the discussion? Yes. We have identified discussion leaders, and then others, as we have grown and scaled the process, other managers recommend additional discussion leaders. So we do some upskilling of the discussion leaders. We provide discussion guides, and then we provide in the journey, there are 3 distinct points in the journey where 6 to 8 members, colleagues, will get together. So that's the size of the peer-to-peer discussion group. And they will discuss a particular topic that's tied to, the first one, for example, is before we even launch the upward feedback journey, the importance of sitting with your team, going through what are the questions going to be? What are my expectations? What fears might you have as employees? You know, what do you hope to get out of this upward feedback so that I can be the best manager for you? So that's conversation number 1. And then the second one is after the managers receive their results, we then bring the peer circles back together. Now they talk about, what did you learn? You know, what are your reactions? How are you processing that? With the expectation that every manager meets with their team and with their direct manager to gain further insight and talk through potentially some blind spots, and very importantly, to get additional clarity on what is the data telling me. And then the third and final discussion is really to talk about, now what are the areas of focus that I'm going to work on developmentally, again, based on the feedback that my team has given me. So very successful model. We continue to expand it and are excited to launch our next cohort, which will begin here actually next week.
That is super cool. It's you're feeding multiple birds with one stone, right? It's development, it's connection. I'm sure it fosters well-being and resilience as well.
Yes.
Building those relationships. That sounds terrific.
It's
know,
also
one thing I would add too. I'm sorry.
We're all jumping in.
Good.
Great.
Go ahead, Natalie, please.
Well, just a quick comment and reflection that both, this program that you've shared, which is so impressive, Teresa, and the really innovative work that you're doing, Cheryl, is I think these are great, just phenomenal examples of intentional, what I've started to think of as like infusions of culture. And Jody and I had a conversation, I mean, feels to me like a million years ago, Jody. It hasn't probably been that long, but, at the sort of beginning of the coming back after the pandemic, whatever, where, someone told me yesterday, or what, it might have been one of you called it POCO, post-COVID, but it's, it's not really post-COVID. We're still in COVID. What we need is to change the cadence of culture. And so, used to be that for the most part, we had this infusion of an experience of culture that was the connective tissue or the glue that tied us to our organization simply by being in the office. And we didn't even realize it in many cases, right? It's just the conversations that were happening around us, the way people were communicating, how people were dressing, and all of these artifacts were really instilling in us a sense of culture and connection and that glue that culture provides. And now we it's not that we need it any less. In fact, we need it just as much, if not more, but we need a new mechanism, and we have to have a different cadence, a different rhythm, and be very intentional about when we're getting these infusions of culture. And these programs are great examples of how we can do that inside organizations, really getting innovative and rethinking how we deliver culture.
That makes a ton of sense to me, Natalie. Thank you. I'm wondering, there's a question that came through in the Q&A that I thought was interesting. Actually, there's a bunch that are interesting, but one that I feel like we might have skipped over, which Jody was really directed to when you're in the process of having to disconnect from associates, how do you make sure that managers continue to connect with colleagues who, are remaining? Like, how do you foster that connection to help those employees still, maintain a sense of belonging and engagement while some of their peers, may no longer have that luxury?
If I understand correctly, I know what we're doing is we're encouraging managers to be real with the survivors. I mean, there is a esprit de corps when you go through an event like this. Obviously you can't wallow in it too long, but you also can't ignore it. Cheryl, I love what you said. Honor the past. What did you say about the present? Something about be present.
Honest about the present, like where you are, and then give hope for the future. Yeah.
Love. Okay. I'm so going to make that my background. So the question, how do you, I sort of sound like a broken record, and I know it's hard for people to be authentic, but there's nothing like a traumatic event to help people to be authentic, quite frankly. Managers who've experienced this for the first time and employees who survived this and experienced it for the first time, there is unity in anguish. And I think I know that we are helping managers help their teams through this process, through supporting them around change models and things like that. But making permission for people to be real, while also, as I said, getting people to focus on the future and learn about the strategy next week and participate in shaping our cultural tenets to move forward, and then shaping our leadership principles moving forward, and then shaping our employee value proposition to be moving forward. So this will be a year's journey of involving Zoomies in sort of the next wave of our future.
I think when we were kicking off, Natalie said a couple words I wrote down around roadmap, guidance, support. I think anytime you're going through something like Zoom just went through, and we did, you really do upfront have to put into the thought for how you're going to help guide managers and leaders through it. There has to be a critical set of steps. And Jody's exactly right. In the immediate aftermath, it's all about empathy, care, listening, letting people emote. But then pretty quickly, businesses need to go back and have kick off a big town hall. Where are we going? What do we have to look forward to? I think team leaders, if I run a function, I need to pull my team together and explain how our work fits into that, how we're going to operate in the new world. Because I think what employees want to hear is, okay, all these people are gone. Do I have to do double or triple the work now? So what's my life going to be like? So I really just think you just have to be methodical in your messaging and give leader toolkits. We take all of our, whenever we have to go through any change, even a positive change, we give our managers a manager toolkit that has what the change is or the announcement, what the talking points are, how to have a meeting about it. And we give them an engagement, kind of like here's step 1 of your meeting, step 2, step 3. And again, they have the power to do whatever they want, but it's just for those that don't really know how or are nervous, it gives them the roadmap to try to do it. And it gives us a way to try to do it a little bit more cohesively, to try to move the whole organization versus a pocket full of good leaders do it well and everybody else does it pretty poorly. So I think those leader toolkits are a must for any big org change.
It sounds like it creates some scaffolding for those who might not have had. Jody mentioned at the start that oftentimes managers, haven't gone through some of these things before, and so it creates it just helps equip them to engage in those conversations in an effective way.
Yes, agreed. And I think just with this, we're on the layoffs, but I think with this, compassion. I think I heard Jody talk about compassion. You need to be very clear as a company that, hey, we're going to give people dignity and respect and compassion. And it's okay to show your heart, and it's okay to show you're upset. Here's some of the things you can't do, right? There are legal things that you can't do. But I think it's good to set the parameters to your leaders who've never done it before it's okay. You don't have to be a robot when you go in there. So I think as much preparation of frontline leaders or leaders giving a message in any situation is going to be helpful.
One thing I'd just like to jump in and add is through our upward feedback, we're really hearing from managers that they need more support from their managers. So as I'm listening to some of the challenges of, navigating through layoffs in very different circumstances and different volumes, it's striking me that there's no roadmap there, but how do we pull from all the strengths and new skills that we've developed through the pandemic, right? The leading with empathy, the listening, the frequent contact, and make sure that the managers who are the ones dealing with these challenging situations, that they're supported as well. So I think making sure that, it's both the bottom up and the top down support, or scaffolding, as we say, that all of those components are in place in the system to make it really effective as can be.
I think that's a great point, Teresa. It's the toolkit is helpful, but also I'm wondering, the peer-to-peer learning, I'm assuming, is also really helpful, because people see that they're in it together and they can get peer coaching from, those who are in the same boat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there can just be some functions are more at the tip of the spear. So even inviting your peers to come talk to your team and share their thoughts and their insights, and they have different perspectives, just helps it make a much more richer view of where we are. So I think it's a really good point.
And I think it's important.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think I do too. And I think it's important to remember when we're talking about, how do we help our managers really have that connection with their people, regardless of, if they're going through a major transition inside the organization today, or simply trying to figure out how to have this new relationship with people that are no longer sitting down the hallway from you, that it's in a way really leveled the playing field. So it's true that Jody's point is so well taken. There are people in managerial positions who've never been in managerial positions and are now managing people that they've never seen in person. And so that's a whole new world. And those managers need support and a roadmap. And there are managers who are highly seasoned and experienced, but in managing in a particular way, in the way that most of us have been managing people for our whole careers, and the rules changed overnight. So, meaning, people are remote or hybrid, and we've had so many conversations with organizations that we're working with to help them, take their culture, but deliver it in this new hybrid or remote format. And so everyone is trying to figure that out. And I think it's one of the beautiful things about the pandemic, sort of painfully beautiful, is that that we're all having to figure out, build new muscle, and we're and the panelists that you see here, we've all had this conversation about the humanness of this whole experience, that we get, we have to be humble and compassionate and acknowledge, like, we don't have all the answers. We never did. And no, we really don't. But we're, if we think about connection as being the secret sauce, then, most of us as human beings can relate to that. Like, okay, my manager is like really saying to me, I want to be connected to you and help you through this. And we're going to have to figure it out together. And that's I think one of the new languages that we need to speak in this new world.
Yeah, and I think what you said about humanity and welcoming people's humanity in, that's like a non-negotiable now. I think we are so far now of people being able to come in and kind of share what they are, that if they end up in an organization where, you kind of have to check your values or your humanness at the door, that's just not going to be a fit. So I love the point on welcoming our humanity and really, as HR practitioners, for those of us that are on the panel, focusing on how we make sure we can celebrate, respect, and empower the humanity of the people in our organizations.
And I think
how do we do that with?
I'm sorry, I was just saying, like, the demand for transparency, I think is higher than ever, because we're so used to seeing people like with their guts pouring out after COVID, that when there is like a lack of that like authenticity or truth, because we're, like I said, we're sort of used to seeing that. That's where I think distrust kind of seeps in, because we're used to seeing people in their kitchens and their dog, like that level of humanness. When that, like when the deflector shield goes up,
Yeah,
it's like hard to dial back from seeing people, you know, in this very personal environment.
I want to ask you guys about how does it, is it different? What's the process for helping managers to connect with employees who may come from, you know, traditionally disadvantaged populations? I think, you know, we've all made the point that it's harder to connect in a remote setting, that you're more likely to only connect with folks who, you know, you work with closely, or who, you know, are in your chain of command. What about folks who may just, you know, based on their background, their demographics, their experiences, may have greater difficulty connecting, you know, even in an in-person setting? Like, what does that look like now, and how do you help managers to make sure that they feel included? And Teresa, I know you guys have had tremendous success with ERG groups. I'm just curious about your perspective on this.
Yeah, thanks. Would love to jump in. So we do have very active employee resource groups. We have 9 currently different groups, where over a third of our employees are involved in at least one of our employee resource groups. And so I would say now more than ever is where managers are really leaning into these ERGs as well, not only for their own benefit, but also to listen to what are some of the systemic and personal issues that our real people are dealing with. And what does that mean for me as a manager? And what does that mean for me in the way that I'm engaging with people? And how do I manage different micro behaviors with different members of the team? So we've really, I would say, very much continuing to leverage the ERG model, and in fact, thinking of them as business resource groups. So how do we get them involved even more so in the business strategy and in really our DIEB aspiration as an organization? How do we leverage the power of these groups to do that? We've also supported managers with unconscious bias training, where over half of our managers have attended that training, again, just to become more literate on the topic of biases and how to be self-aware and to deal with those biases in day-to-day interactions. So those are a couple of the things that we're doing. I would say we definitely have very active ERGs that we continue to nurture.
yeah.
Well,
I'd
you know,
love
the
to jump in.
30% number is great.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
No, please go.
I was just going to say, I think I have two thoughts on this. One is just normalizing and making it a practice to do listening sessions, teaching your managers how to do listening sessions, because people want to be motivated, inspired, and developed differently, right? So one size doesn't fit all. And when you have folks, you know, from any different demographic or anything, you know, the important thing is for that manager to learn how to listen and ask the right questions and be vulnerable, that they don't have all the answers, you know. And you know, we certainly saw this as we navigated some of the social issues in 2020 around George Floyd's murder, and how we tried to equip managers to go into that conversation just with wanting to listen and being curious, that just what's that experience for you. So I think we've really we've made curiosity one of our truths, and are really teaching from every person in the organization the value of being continuously curious about your people, about the product, about the business, about our customer. And so it's woven into the fabric of how we do things. I think the second is we're smaller. So I come from a very big company that had ERGs. we're smaller, and so we've taken a slightly different view on this, where we have ours is called inclusion, diversity, and belonging, but we have an IDB council, and it actually brings together, if you think of the verticals of the ERGs, we actually bring all those groups together, and we give them the power of the masses that they are together versus separating them out. And we focus on different topics that might be relevant. But what we try to show is that if you look at us as humans, again, our people strategy is based on the humanity of us. We have a lot in common as humans. We have experiences that make us different. So how do we value and respect and try to use the power of those groups together to get, different relationship building or different visibility to leadership or different cultivation of, of how you do your work. But we've taken that different approach where we're trying to just bring it all together. And so I think that's been helpful because you can see other folks struggle with similar issues, and it normalizes that a lot of people have some challenges. It's just not necessarily confined to where you are or where you come from.
Yeah, it's a great point. There was a question in the chat that I'd like to ask Natalie. Natalie, someone asked, made the point that we talk a lot about managers really being the drivers of culture, but how do you help new managers understand the company culture? Like, how can you leverage your connection with them to really drive culture and get them, educated and equipped?
Yeah, it's a great question because, right, these are our frontline culture carriers, are our managers, are our people leaders, and it's really critical not to assume that they are that the values that are explain how we do things in our organization are clear to them or are embedded in what they do. And so, in my experience and working with organizations and working on culture, it's so important to keep it very simple. Most people head nod around, yeah, culture is important. And then like right after, it's like this big hairball that I don't know really what to do with or how to manage. And so we have to keep organization culture exceptionally simple, easy to understand. We know that best practice is like 4 to 6 values that are unique to your company, that really mean something to you, and that have behaviors attached. So, and not a laundry list, right? So everyone, a measuring stick, everyone in your organization should be able to say, like, yeah, these are our 4 values, and I know what they mean to me. And so helping your managers really feel into that, understand it, and have examples of experiences of what those mean to make culture inspiring and authentic to them is absolutely the first step. And this, as you all can probably tell, this is a little bit of a culture club. We've been chatting about culture for several months now, if not more. And one of the things that keeps coming up over and over again is that so many people are joining organizations and they've never stepped foot in the office or seen anyone in person who they work with. And so they don't have that. And that includes our managers, right? So many of our managers who are our culture carriers are in that position. And so first of all, making sure that your values are really well understood in your organization, that they're from the top, that there's alignment around what they are, what they mean, and that all of what you're doing in your company, how you make decisions, how you communicate, what you recognize. We know recognition is the number one driver of culture alignment, that we're recognizing and appreciating people for behaviors that are aligned with our core values. Making sure that alignment exists in how you're doing your business with those values is the most effective way to indoctrinate your managers, to infuse them with that deep sense of your culture so that they can then translate it down to the people on their teams and throughout the organization.
And I know, Jody, you guys you mentioned that you're refreshing your culture tenets, and you also mentioned that you had to hire 6,000 people during the pandemic. How did you get them up to speed, and what are you doing now to sort of make clear what those culture tenets are? How do you operationalize that?
We were going to start, I think pre-COVID Zoomies that were in the office had a very clearly defined, unified sense of culture. And then the 6,000 that came after that all came with the culture from their previous companies and probably would define culture differently, every single one of them. So we're about to, like I said, launch this initiative to something around, hey, based on the survey, the engagement surveys, and based on the interviews, and based on our marketing material, and based on everything else, here are the themes that are familiar to you. So it's not going to be like a complete departure, like starting from scratch. Now, what do these words mean to you? And like I said, like Natalie said, we'll call it down to 4 to 6 and then attach behaviors to it, those values. So we'll see, check, maybe that's another seminar, like, 6 months from now, but I'm hopeful. And I feel like bringing people along the journey will create some ownership.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. And I know I'm looking at the time. I'm gonna ask one more question here from the chat, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Natalie to close us out. Teresa, there's been a couple of questions in the chat around the tools that you use and the metrics that you use around your manager excellence process. So, like what 360 instrument, and how do you measure the development and success of the programs in terms of connecting managers to one another?
Terrific. So in terms of the platform we're using, actually it's one of the Achievers tools called Feedback. Again, the design of that is aligned with our own proprietary manager framework, which again articulates expectations of a manager. So a very flexible tool. And then to create the individual manager reports, we are using Power BI as the delivery mechanism of the individual results. In terms of measurement, we're very excited because we are starting our 4th cycle. And so we're beginning to have trended data and able to look at what did the results around particular question set a year ago, what did those look like at this time now? And are we making material progress at the organizational level? We also look by business unit. We look at our support units. We're very deep right now. In fact, we just had a discussion earlier this week with our CEO and the executive team on what is all the data and analysis telling us. So we're looking at various demographic data to see what do the results look like by female versus male? Do we have generational differences? What does it look like for different levels within the organization? And then taking all of that, very importantly, to say, what's the so what, and how are we going to use that feedback to then inform how we shape our manager capability building efforts going forward. We're also piloting, I would say, and we're in a test mode right now of a net promoter score for managers. So very much still in the learning of that. We need to let the data mature a bit more before we're ready to say that a manager net promoter is actually a proxy, if you will, for what managerial excellence looks like. So more to come on that, and we'll see what the data tells us.
That's very cool. I might just build on that and say that we've done work with Verizon, and one of the cool ways that they've measured, particularly around manager connection, is through organizational network analysis as a vehicle to sort of see pre and post how those sorts of programs drive connection. Okay, so we are almost completed our journey. I want to hand it over to Natalie to sort of close us out. Natalie, and first let me thank all of our panelists for taking the time today. Great perspective. Really enjoyed the conversation. This session is being recorded. I know there's a question about the bios. Any questions we didn't get to over the course of the discussion that were put into the chat or the Q&A, we will endeavor to get back to you with answers to those. So Natalie, please close us out.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. And I echo those thanks to our incredible panelists for sharing your experience and this just heartfelt sharing of your struggles and your inspiration. Thank you to both Achievers and CLA for the fantastic partnership and collective dedication to changing the way the world works through technology and services that made today's webinar possible. And if you're inspired to keep learning about ways to empower your managers to build a connected culture experience for their teams and their employees, please consider taking a look at the Connected Culture Leadership Workshop review and Network Leadership White Paper, and the Achievers Workforce Institute 2023 Engagement and Retention Report. The Future is Flexible, hot off the presses today, all in the related content tool, and we'll share with you via email afterwards as well. And we also have some great events coming up, including a CLA think tank on fostering a connected company culture, which is a great way to have a conversation with like-minded senior leaders grappling with this topic, and a micro workshop, which is a complimentary preview of our traditional 5-session series workshop. This one is on connected culture leaders, and we have this micro workshop that's complimentary coming up on March 16th. So please register for our think tank and our micro workshop. And of course, please feel free to reach out to us at Achievers or CLA if you have any questions regarding culture and the employee experience that we can answer, about connecting managers, or whatever's top of mind for you as you navigate this evolving business landscape. Thank you so very much.